Today, the first episode of the final season of Better Call Saul debuts, so it seemed like the perfect time to go back through the entire series and share my thoughts. So today we're kicking things off with Season 1. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on Better Call Saul. Have you watched it? What did you think about it? What do you think about the Breaking Bad verse in general? Here's the way that this is going to work. I'm going to kick things off with my experience watching the show. Then I'm going to give my spoiler-free thoughts because I know a lot of you have watched Breaking Bad, but you haven't watched Better Call Saul yet, so I want to give you my spoiler-free thoughts to try and convince you to check out the show while this final season is going, and then I'm going to go into specific plot points, character arcs, all of the stuff. What do I think about what happened in the first season of the show? And one final thing before we get started, I am dropping this review at the same time, well, hopefully at the same time, at least on the same day as Cody Leach. You can check out his review somewhere up here of Season 1 of Better Call Saul. And let's get started with my experience with Better Call Saul and the Breaking Bad verse. So I started watching Breaking Bad, I believe, after Season 4 dropped. There was tons of buzz surrounding it, and then it started dropping on Netflix, and so then I binged through the show, and I didn't watch the final season week to week, but I watched it kind of in batches, and then I did watch the season finale, or series finale, of Breaking Bad the day that it dropped, and when they said that they were doing a spinoff with Saul, I was like, well, that's interesting. I trust the writers. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how that'll play, but I was curious because they did such a good job and seemed to have really good instincts as to what they were doing and knew to end the show before it got bad. And so if they thought they had an idea for a spinoff, I was interested. So then when Better Call Saul did debut, I watched the first half of the first season when it initially debuted. But if you kind of know my life story, the year 2015 was kind of a really rough patch in my life. A lot of crazy stuff going on. I had a 1-year-old, I had a 3-year-old, and I had a lot of personal struggles. I was trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And so we just didn't keep watching. We enjoyed what we watched, but didn't hook us enough to keep watching through it. And so it's just kind of one of those shows out there that we always meant to watch, we were interested in watching, but didn't watch. Then, over the last couple of years, with all the breaks for movies coming out, we were able to catch up on a lot of stuff. So going into last year and hearing murmurs that we're going to get the final season of Better Call Saul, and then the movie Nobody dropped it and made me go, I really like Bob Odenkirk. Bob Odenkirk has a TV show called Better Call Saul that I have not watched yet. Time to fix that. And so last year we binged through Better Call Saul, got all caught up on it, and for whatever reason I didn't post videos last year, and so I'm rewatching it again this year to do these videos, as well as prepare to do some rankings tied to Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and be fully prepared to watch through this final season and fully appreciate the entire experience. With that said, let's dive into my spoiler-free thoughts on Better Call Saul, in particular Season 1. But just in general, here's what I would say about Better Call Saul, is that the writing, the acting, the production values are entirely on par with Breaking Bad. They take their time to get the plot right, take their time to earn plot points, and tell their story in a compelling way. But the idea of a sleazy lawyer and his struggles with his brother and trying to do the right thing and not go back to Breaking Bad, it doesn't have the immediate sensational hook that Breaking Bad had, where right out of the gate, you're in the first episode of Breaking Bad, and there's just something immediately addictive about watching a high school teacher decide to break the law, and immediately they're getting into very addictive type things where you just have to see what's going to happen next, where they've kidnapped a person and he's locked in the basement and they're trying to figure out what to do with him. It gets very quickly to the wild, crazy stuff. And Better Call Saul takes like 3 seasons to get there. The writing's just as good, but the subject matter, it's not quite as flashy. And so you have to be in for the long haul. if you just watch the first couple episodes, you're like, yeah, I mean, the acting's great. This is interesting. But it doesn't immediately make you go, man, I have to watch the next episode the way that Breaking Bad just right out of the gate draws you in and hooks you. But what it does do is it just does these very deep character studies about complex humans with multiple dimensions, complex relationships where each person's character flaws bounces off the other person and pushes each of them to just make the wrong choice that pushes the other person just a little bit further down the wrong path. And it's so compelling because the writing is so very good. So specifically when it comes to season 1, it is a little bit difficult to get through. Or not difficult to get through, but you're watching the person that we know will turn into Saul Goodman try and be a good lawyer, try and earn the respect of his brother, try to earn the respect of these people around him. But you're seeing the context that drove him to be such a sleazy person in Breaking Bad. You're seeing all the good in him, all the potential to be someone that wasn't the guy that enabled Walter White to go down such a dark path. You see all of that and the set of tragic choices, tragic circumstances, conflicting personalities, unlikely scenarios that just push him in the wrong direction. And so very much a setup season, very much laying the foundation, very much giving the context that would lead to so many of the events and so many of the characters that are in Breaking Bad. So it's a prequel done right, where it's not rushing to answer questions that I wasn't asking. It's not rushing to throw in all of these people. It's just slowly getting there. And in the process, telling compelling character stories. So I think if you're in for the long haul, and if you like Breaking Bad, it's not like that's like this easy cotton candy show to watch. If you like Breaking Bad, you just have to be a little bit more patient. It gets to about season 3 before things really get going and things get rolling. The writing's always good. I'm not saying the writing's not good, but you are kind of dealing with this lawyer show where Jimmy is into elder law and it's a lot about his relationship with his brother. It does take time. But if you're willing to put in the time, make the investment, it really does pay off and it's very compelling stuff. I don't think they skipped a beat when it came to the writing, production, acting at all with this show. But as I keep saying, it's not as flashy as teacher becomes drug dealer and is killing people in episode 2 and melting people in episode 3. However that played out in Breaking Bad. It's not quite as immediate, like, whoa, this show's crazy. This one takes a lot longer to get crazy, and it never gets as wild and crazy, but it is very character-based. Really good stuff. From there, let's dive into our spoilers. So if you haven't watched Better Call Saul yet, tune out, head on over to Netflix, start binging through it. Let's get started talking through some different things about the show. Part number 1, I'll kind of break this down based off of the characters, plot points, things like that. So we'll kick off talking about Jimmy himself. And what's so interesting about this one is that Saul Goodman seems so established as sleazy lawyer that if you're a criminal, you call him. That's who he's established as when he's introduced in the show, where Jesse Pinkman's like, hey, he's the lawyer for criminals. You call him if you're a criminal and you want to get off. He's so established as that when you see him at the beginning of this and you're seeing his day-to-day life where he's not the character. Saul Goodman is such a character, a caricature of the sleazy lawyer, intentionally so, that when you see him here and he's taking care of his brother and she's trying to do the right thing and be on this redemptive path, and he's a person who deeply wants his brother's respect. And he spends years taking care of his brother. I guess, I don't know, it's not a ton of years, but several years, taking care of his brother, who clearly has a fake illness, but he's going along with it to just everything that his brother needs because he so desperately wants the love and respect of his brother. And that's such an authentic human experience. And then you look at where he becomes, like what on Saul Goodman, who seems so deeply inauthentic, so just trying to make the money, and how do you go from one to the other? And the season slowly starts to show you that. And at the end of this, we'll talk about the tragedy of Jimmy and Chuck, but we'll get to the tragedy in Jimmy and Chuck. But you just see this guy that we slowly learned that he was like a con man and got in really, really bad place because of just all his shenanigans. His brother bails him out. And he goes on this very long path of, in his very Jimmy sort of way, being true to Jimmy, tries to do the thing that his brother would respect, becoming a lawyer. And thinking if he can just do that, he'll get his brother's respect, which is such a human motivation. We all have those people in our life that we so desperately want their respect and their affection, and we'll go to great lengths to get it. All while kind of misreading the room, which we also all have those people in our lives. We're so desperate for their respect, their attention, whatever we're looking to get from them, that we're blinded to the reality of how they perceive us. And all of it's so human, while taking this caricature of a lawyer, we're just taking that caricature of a lawyer and grounding him in a reality that's so fascinating. And then from there, let's move over to Chuck, where they establish Chuck as the polar opposite of Saul Goodman. Saul Goodman, the sleazy lawyer in the ridiculous suits, the ambulance chaser, every stereotype of the awful, no good lawyer just trying to make a quick buck the sleaziest way possible. That's who Saul Goodman is. And then we watched his journey with Walter White of like, man, this guy's willing to do sleazy stuff to make things happen. And then we meet Chuck. And there's a couple aspects to Chuck, obviously the illness, but as the lawyer Chuck, he's the example of the prestigious lawyer that makes a ton of money, that lives this elitist life, that is all about reputation and name, and is with this firm that's everything's prim and proper. It is the opposite of Jimmy. It is the opposite of Saul Goodman. And also, you look at these two brothers and how different they are. Of like, Jimmy is real good with people and fun and likable and funny, but he kind of lacks a moral compass. And he tends to have a deep, like a intuitive decency to him in the one sense, while also being very willing to do awful things. And then Chuck is doing all the right things career-wise you're supposed to do, follows the rules, but is also fundamentally kind of a jerk. Not the best with people. Like in elitist prestige world, very well respected, but when it comes to normal people world, ground level interactions, doesn't connect with people on the same level that Jimmy does. And you just see them as like such opposites on every single level of what they're good at, what they're bad at, everything in clashing with one another. And also in the way that they show their love to each other. Jimmy spends all like desperately taking care of his brother. And Chuck, in another sense, is desperately taking care of his brother. But in the older brother kind of way of bailing his brother out, always kind of looking down on him. Jimmy, serving his older brother, even means waking up early, doing all these crazy things to take care of his brother. Just something so compelling about such different people. And I love that both of the actors here are people that have such deep roots in comedy, playing such dramatic roles. You know, Michael McKean, you know, the point of reference for me, Michael McKean, is Clue and This Is Spinal Tap. I mean, he's done a zillion other things, but it's like, you know, the definitive mockumentary, This Is Spinal Tap, and he's singing these ridiculous songs. And then Clue, the board game brought to life as this slapstick comedy. Those are my formative things for Michael McKean. And then Chuck is this character that's played totally straight. And I love that they're taking these such great comedic actors and comedic writers and then dropping them into such serious roles. So let's kind of dive into some of the plot points of the season. And I think that where you kind of, like I talked about in the spoiler-free part about it doesn't immediately hook you, whereas Breaking Bad, teacher cooking meth, kidnapping drug lords, choking them out, hiding the body, there's like, it's very action-based, quick-moving, fantastical, like, whoa, what is this? One of the big plot points driving this season is there's a couple that embezzled a bunch of money that are being charged, and they like go into hiding. And they faked some stuff, but it doesn't play out too much, and it's like, okay, we're like, Jimmy tracks them down. It doesn't immediately pop in the same way. It's interesting, get some laughs out of it. You get these wacky characters in a certain sense, but wacky, but just grounded enough. But it's not as, it's just not as flashy. It's not as it doesn't hook you in the same way. And you get a little bit, I guess, in the first couple episodes with the Jimmy working with the guys that are trying to scam people, and then they get mixed up with Tuco. So you kind of bring in just a little bit of the, a character that was in Breaking Bad and his craziness. And so you get the threats and danger from that kind of leads to some of the stuff that plays out with, Jimmy, Nacho, this family. But not really, it's not the same level of intrigue and excitement as what you get, once again, as I keep saying, with the Breaking Bad, in your face, immediately hooks you type stuff. And then even as you kind of get into what's going on with Jimmy, the main plot for Jimmy is he decides to move into elder law, and he starts looking at their contracts and realizes that they're getting overcharged. And so then he gets kicked out of the place, so he goes into the garbage and pulls the shredded files and works with his brother to tape them back together. Contrast that with, that's what he does in like episode 6 of this season. Episode 6 of Breaking Bad, Walter White makes a bomb, throws it on the ground, explodes, walks out of the building. There's a reason that literally took me 6 years to get into this show. At no point in time did I think it was bad, but elder law versus Walter White making bombs, different levels of immediate gratification, immediate payoff. Maybe that's a way to phrase it. The immediate gratification and payoff that comes much quicker with Breaking Bad, of just like seeing stuff that you're like, whoa, whereas here, it definitely takes time to get there, because lawyer trying to earn the respect of his brother, teacher, Breaking Bad, one of those is more instantly compelling in an interesting sort of way. So we have several of those kind of plot lines, and then I guess the other thing kind of going on here, let's move over to Mike. This is another one where it just kind of takes its time, where Mike shows up, and you see him in such a different place. Mike debuts in Breaking Bad, and if I recall correctly, I watched through it last in 2019. Debuts, and it's like playing like this funky tune out of like a 70s thriller of him doing like a mission, and then it introduces him through that, of him like taking guys out as some assignment that he was on, and introduced very cool, interesting, like, who is this enforcer guy that just showed up? This introduction on Better Call Saul. He's working the booth at the town hall where the courthouse is. And he's the guy telling Jimmy McGill, you need to have one more sticker. Like, there could not be like, are contrasting introductions to Mike on these different shows, which is so much of what makes this show interesting, if you can have the patience for it, is watching this slow progression from sticker guy. What's he doing in his booth? Sticker guy to cool enforcer guy in Breaking Bad. How did he go so... What on earth happened there? And what motivated it? What drove that to happen? And you kind of start going through this season, and it gets to episode 5, and he gets a whole episode to himself. They just pause for an episode where you see Mike's backstory about how did he turn so hard. And you realize kind of a corrupt cop. His job is to like follow the rules, but had a little corruption to him. And his son got killed essentially because of him. His son wasn't corrupt. And he's just riddled with guilt over what happened with his son. And he lives essentially to provide for his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. That's it. And whatever he needs to do to give them the life that they need, that's what he's going to do. And you go, man, that's interesting. Like, you just watch it. All of these little choices. Why is he in Albuquerque? How does he slowly start making these choices? And it just watch as all this plays out of the strange dynamic with the daughter-in-law and this hardened enforcer for underground types who's so soft with his granddaughter most of the time. Later in the show, some stuff happens, but it's just interesting to watch that descent. But his plotline in this season is pretty slow because for most of it, he's working a booth. Couple of times he's getting connected to Jimmy, giving Jimmy some advice here and there, just a little bit. But he doesn't have the most compelling stuff. His plot picks up quite a bit in the next season where he starts getting tied into things. But here, not so much. Much slower to get started. Yeah, you get some standout stuff. The one, I love the plot line where they have the guy that hires the 3 guys, the bodyguards, and this clueless guy goes out and Mike takes out the other 2 guys, collects their money, and you realize this guy's clueless as to how he's selling these stuff to Nacho's doing the side business, and you realize real quickly Mike does his homework and how he operates and everything like that. In that slowly, once in the whole show, it's this slow burn show of building the connections. And how does Mike get wrapped up into this? He takes his job for this doofus, and through that gets connected to Nacho, who has these connections. Just slowly plays it out, because that's how good the writing is. It's not in a rush to make things happen. So if you're patient, it's so good and it's so satisfying. Final big thing we got to talk about here is the tragedy of Jimmy and Chuck. And as you start to realize, as much as they love each other and care about each other, they're just so different. As much as Jimmy desperately wants his brother's affection, he will never be able to get his brother's respect because his brother does not respect him and thinks that his brother rightly knows that his moral compass is broken. But instead of choosing to mentor him as he's trying so desperately to get on the right path, all he sees is his brother cutting corners again and going to the University of American Samoa or whatever it was. And despite the fact, like, he did pass the bar exam, like, he actually is a lawyer. He did it, and he is clever. He is smart, but he's not a Chuck lawyer. He's not like Chuck. He's like Jimmy, and Jimmy has to be Jimmy. Jimmy can't stop being Jimmy, which is what we definitely see in season 2, and we'll get to that. But you just see the tragedy of the fact that if Chuck had just poured into him, given him some respect, it could have prevented so much of what happened. And Chuck wasn't wrong that Jimmy as a lawyer could be a disaster, and it turned out to be a disaster. But how much of that was a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because Chuck wouldn't, like, Jimmy, this is amazing, but you need a mentor. And I'm going to guide you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to help you be you. I'm going to give you the freedom to be you. But I got to, instead he deceived him. He wrote him out. He wouldn't let him in. He put barriers up. And he burned all the bridges that basically pushed Jimmy to being Slippin' Jimmy as a lawyer, which turned into Saul Goodman, which obviously is devastating. It's so tragic what it turns into. And that's what the great writing is. These guys know how to tell compelling tragedies. You have the moments of victory followed by just gut-wrenching defeat. And you keep rooting for that redemptive story for Jimmy, all the while knowing he's going to turn into Saul Goodman. And it goes really bad. And this is a perfect example of sometimes knowing the end doesn't change the fact that the journey is what makes it so compelling. I will say this, I thought the final episode was a bit of an odd epilogue where he goes off and hangs out with his friend for a little bit. Seemed like the weakest episode of the season, and it kind of was important for maybe setting him down a certain path and giving some information, but I wasn't crazy about exactly how that played out. Anyway, that's my my thoughts on season 1 of Better Call Saul. If you want to see my ranking of the seasons of Breaking Bad, you can check that out right over here. I do plan on doing these reviews for each of the seasons of Better Call Saul as we go through this. Also remember to check out Cody Leach's video. I'll have it down here, link down below, something like that. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.